Hey, welcome to another episode of the Ideas in Motion show, recorded live. And this week, I'm talking about time boxing. As someone that works from home, and many of us have been, shifted to a work from home environment, I've been working in a home environment for about 7 years. And there have been, times, back in the day when we were still going out to work, where, I'd blend that. And so one of the things that I find that a lot of people struggle with right now, including myself, is time. And this show is all about bringing the confidence to do the things that you want to do, to make your life better, happier, more fulfilled in your mind, your body, and your purpose. And in order to be able to do that, it's important to be able to find the time to do that. So I've just kind of been focusing on a little bit of a mini series of time management. And today it's time boxing, where I'm playing on words. It's otherwise known as, time blocking, and I'm kind of playing on words because doesn't it feel like a fight sometimes? Like you get ready, you make your schedule, and I did a great job. I was writing an article as part of a course in a time management course, and I was so getting all jacked up about like getting my schedule all in flow and having everything work beautifully and execute my time boxing blocking strategy this week. And what happens on Mondays typically, right? Mondays are typically like, I have an analogy, like you've seen that little gif, right, where Mondays be like, well, Tuesdays after a long weekend be like, and then Tuesdays after a long weekend and a full moon, well, it's just perfect storm for a knockout of your perfectly crafted schedule. So the process of planning is the bigger piece of work. Time blocking, or time boxing, I'm going to call it boxing, was first brought coined the term boxing by Elon Musk. And I think everybody has their own special way of like formulating it so that it works for you. But what I find that works best for me is a process that I'm going to share with you here in a little bit. And sometimes, it's easier just to break it down to the easiest points. Like when I was a beauty advisor, I worked out away from home. I time blocked naturally. I didn't even have to think about it. There's this chunk of time where you have before work. So that's the chunk of time that I would get my workout in, I would pack my lunch, I'd get ready for work, I'd drive to work. It's a chunk of time. I arrive at work, I'm there. I know I'm going to be there for 6 to 8 hours. I clock in, I clock out. I know what that chunk of time is. And then there's a chunk of time after work reserved for, maybe there's appointments, meetings, social, all of these things. We naturally time block. Now, the difference between going to work at another place and working from home is what's expected of you. So I'm going to take it back to the beauty advising. Okay, so I get there and I clock in. I know what I need to do that day. I have a list of things that I'm supposed to do in between clients and customers, because the clients and the customers are the number one priority. My number one priority is to serve and to sell. Okay, so that's what cosmeticians do. You serve, service, and selling. And so as soon as somebody would walk in the door, you drop what you're doing and you're all attention on them, have conversations. And back in the day, most of my clients were like, it was like having like best friend day all the time. It was awesome. So you have these great interactions going on, and sometimes people buy and sometimes they don't. And so that is not a reflection of your pay. You still get paid. You clock in, You get paid by the hour, you clock out. If you're socializing a little too long with a client, you still get paid. You go for your lunch, you get paid. You go for your break, you get paid. When you work from home, the indication of pay is output, production. Yes, you're going to have those client meetings. Yes, you're going to have the sales calls. And depending on what your structure is, if you're paid by the hour or if you're paid by the piece, your productivity relies on having that output. So if you're, interviewing new clients, you're not getting paid. If you're calling your mom, having an hour-long phone call because you work from home, you're not getting paid. If you take that lunch break for 20 minutes, you say you're going to go for a walk, quickly walk the dog, and you end up meeting your best friend in a trail, and it's a pandemic, and you're starving for people, and you're standing 6 feet apart, and you end up talking for an extra 20 minutes. You're not getting paid. And your to-do list is sitting at home of the output that gets you paid. Now, when you time box or you time block, it gives you the power of knowing where your wiggle room is and where it isn't. And it also gives you the power to take time back. The more you stick into those parameters, the more great work you're going to produce and the more spare time you're going to have. Now, not everybody likes a rigid schedule, and not everybody can do a rigid schedule, and some people thrive by it. But it's going to move, it's going to change. And so let's first talk about the right way to time box and what there's different ways. Okay, time box and time block. And the thing is when you sit down to do something, which is why in one of my previous episodes I talk about time inventory and knowing how long it takes you to do certain tasks. So for example, if you have a time block period, say you're working on a project for 2 hours with a client on a Monday, okay? Case scenario. And you look at where you are and you're like, "Oh, I could finish this if I spent another half hour on it." You have the choice of ending it right there or looking at the rest of your day and saying, "You know what? I have to move on." So some people say, have that flexible window. I prefer to stay in the windows. And here's why. Because if you're working on a project you have to get comfortable with having things undone. You let the client know when it's going to be done. You give yourself a longer time and you give the client a longer statement of when it's going to be done, then you know that you're going to be done so that you have more control over your time boxing and time blocking. So that's kind of how I do it. I think everybody has their own personal way. I'm going to share with you. I wrote it down. My main discipline that I had to really, really work hard on because I was always trained to drop and serve, right? When I was in cosmetics, when I was in retail, when I was in anything else, I was paid to drop and serve. So when you drop and serve and you're working on a project, you're never going to get the project done because you keep dropping it. So the discipline in doing this is to close the box. And by doing that, I say you get in the box, you turn the notifications off on your phone, you get off of Slack, you get off of email, you do nothing but the project that you've budgeted in that time. Now, if it's an appointment with a client, that's a different thing. You're in an appointment. That's still their time block. I have the sun coming in my window at this time of day. So the lighting is a little off if you're watching this, but live here and that's cool. In this show, we are unedited, authentic, And you never know what might happen. So we like that. Okay, so the discipline is to close the box. I'm going to reiterate that. To close the box, you turn off all notifications. You turn off, get out of your inbox, get out of your Slack. Make sure that you're not going to be disturbed. Close your door if you need to. And make sure that you have the timer on. Something about the timer of it's just like going back to the analogy of when you're recording all of your food for a day. You're in it. You're more aware of the time that you're doing. It's not that it's a race to the clock. You still need to focus on doing great work, but it helps you to put your brain in and put your 150% in that piece of work, which is why clients have hired you. It's why people want to work with you, because you do amazing work. But you don't do amazing work when you're getting notifications and pings and pongs and knocks on the door and barks and mom and everything. How are you supposed to focus on great work when your time is slipping away? So completely close the box. You can get out of the box in an hour, and have some free time and go for a walk, go do a lap around the house, schedule that time in your blocks. So this is the first thing that you need to do is you need to take out a piece of paper or a calendar. You can even use, those calendars. We all get them in the mail and they're not used. And and they sit in the shelf until you finally bring them into the recycling, right? You get them from, real estate agents, from the city, from wherever. We all have those free calendars hanging around. So if you don't have a planner, I guarantee you probably have a calendar. You just take it out and you have your week. And then all you need to do is overview and establish your work hours. So how many hours do you want to work a week? No, that's a trick question. How many hours do you want to work a week, and how many hours can you actually work a week? So those are two things that you just totally need to be self-aware of. And again, the only way to do that is to have an honest time inventory. The next thing you want to do is establish your work hours. So look at everything that's going on in your life. You got to establish the office hours where you're going to be totally focused and dedicated to your work within that time zone. And for some people, that's going to vary. You're going to need sometimes childcare. Sometimes you're going to need to spell things off. Sometimes you're going to need to be the evening and weekends because that's what works in your season right now. The key is to know what those work hours are. Let everybody else in your world know what those work hours are, and then you have to stick to it so that you can consistently bring about, better work, more time, better money, more control. Okay, so the next thing that you're going to do is you're going to schedule your breaks and your self-care. Too many times, like I said, I've done it. I go for a walk and it's like, oh shoot, I scheduled this walk. It was only supposed to be half an hour, and I met Betty on the trail, and it's now been an hour and a half. Oh crap! So there's the choice. I made a choice. Had I looked at my week and known how crunched it is, I might have made a different choice, right? So you have to schedule your breaks and your self-care. And again, stay in that box. It might seem rigid at first. It might seem like you're taking away your freedom at first, but I guarantee you it gives you more control and freedom in the long term. It's never one and done. It's never set it and forget it. This is a sliding scale, but this is a way that you have control. And I'll get to that in just a second. So the next step is to look at your responsibilities. Okay, so you've scheduled your breaks and your self-care time. Now you got to look at your responsibilities. Everything that you said that you would do that you can't do. So these are things like, you know, work that you've promised that you're going to do for your pay. They're times with family. Maybe it's outings. Maybe it's appointments. Maybe it's times with your coach. Maybe it's, whatever it is that's already anchored in. Maybe you're finally going to get your hair done or to the dentist, and that's anchored in a slot. So look at that. Um, Then establish how many hours you want to work this week. So you've already taken out establishing your work hours. It's how many hours, and I think I already said this. Make sure that it's how many hours that you can work. So go on the lower end. Give yourself some wiggle room. Then you're going to divide your client time by project, by deliverability date. So of course, the faster approaching, you want to have those first in your week. So the slower approaching deadlines, those are the ones that are going to have more of the wiggle room. So what I find is best to do is I have a fast approaching client and a slower approaching client. And I have those two paired together on a day, because I know if the fast approaching client, if something goes wrong there's a fast approaching deadline, I have some wiggle room onto that less. So the key is to not have too many clients, right? That's another key. So I'm going to wrap around to that in just a second. So if at all possible, when you're doing your schedule, and sometimes this is possible and sometimes it isn't. I've used Wednesdays and I've used Fridays. I find that those 2 days are really great, but it's your parking lot day. And I call it the parking lot day because that's the day that you're going to need to have in the back of your pocket, right? When all of those boxes get scattered, or suddenly that someone has an emergency that maybe maybe you were planning that you would be working on their project the following week. There's always something. Or maybe your dog goes in for surgery and now you're scheduling all this physiotherapy, or you have to be there more in a certain territory, like a certain area. Try as best as you can to at least have an afternoon or a morning where or a full day where you have no schedules, no appointments, and it's completely your parking lot day, where you can assess and reassess and be able to you know fix all those wiggle room spots, so that by the time Friday comes along, you're you're going into the weekend like, this is my time. And that might be a different weekend for, like, people. Some people have different weekends. Some people do find it better to work through the weekend. Guess why? Because typically clients will not call you on the weekend. Typically, there will be no meetings on the weekend. So that's like 2 days of parking lot time. However, there is a danger of working 7 days a week if you rely on that parking lot time all the time, or if you let everything spill over into the weekend all the time. Unless you have that dedicated, okay, that's how I'm going to get my 35 clocked hours in this week, is if I work 7 days a week, 5 hours a day. Then you shut it off and you walk away. You determine where those hours are. And that's how you're going to be able to avoid burnout, have more time, earn more money, get more leads, get more people recommending you because of the work that you do. Guys, it's not just about time boxing, and it's not just about, you know, productivity. It's about the quality of work and the amount of times that you have to use your brain on a toggle switch. So when you sit down to do your work, sit down to do your work. Schedule time if you want to play on social media. Schedule time for those emails that you know that you need to answer in the morning. And then maybe at the end of the day, when you need to sweep around and let everybody know what what went on that week. Like, it's a good best practice to also let your clients know, this is what I did today, this is where we are, this is where I guarantee to have the work done by and in your inbox. So these are just some of the best practices that I use, and I find that there are so many benefits to it, the number one benefit though is when you are truly aware of where your time is going and how you can actually take control of that time, you also know what you need to say yes and what you see no to. Sometimes when we're working from home, actually, when you're working from home or you're contracting, we're always thinking, how am I going to pay the rent? How or the mortgage? Where where's that next, client going to come from? This client might be closing soon because we're almost done their work. Um, and what happens is when you have too many clients, or when you have that feeling because you see that your week is light, the biggest mistake I see happening in the world that I live in remote workers, is looking for something to fill that time prematurely. Because guaranteed, you'll have your week perfectly crafted, perfectly planned out, and you'll be like ready to execute. And somebody or something is going to come and ruffle everything up. They're going to take your box and they're going to say, "Where are you?" And they're going to turn it upside down and they're going to shake it until you come out of that box and you move. And life's like that, right? But you have the control, and you still have all the cards in your hands, so to speak, all the control of your schedule if you know and you make one. When we go to work outside the home and we clock in and we clock out, our schedule is predetermined for us. It's up to you to have the discipline to know when to be in the box and get out of the box, and when to close the box and go home, right? Close the door and get out of work. You can't do that if you're working from the time on your phone, from the time you get up to the time you go to bed at night, answering client calls in the middle of the day, when it's your lunchtime scrolling on social media or answering those client texts. You never give yourself a break. And that's why it feels like you're always working and not accomplishing anything. So hopefully this was helpful to you. It's huge on my heart because I find that lately it's been one of the biggest challenges and one of the biggest sources of burnout. And I'm not immune. Like, it's not one and done. These are practices that you continue to have to circle back to and continue to have to put yourself in that space. And every time you do it, you'll get more and more confident about who you are as a person, what you serve, the work that you do, and your on and off time. Not to mention, you're going to find time to do the other things that have been slipping off the side of your desk that you've been wanting to do forever. You do have control of your time. You do have more control of your distractions. Take back your brain, because every time a bing goes, you have to make a decision to answer it or not. And that little micro moment is fatiguing you, especially if you're doing it 20, 30, 40 times a day. I digress. Time is something that we cannot take for granted. Time is something that we never get back. And in order for you to be your best for everybody else around you, including your loved ones, it's important that you have a sense of time. So next week, I'm going to do my favorite, and that is talking about, and you know what? If you're watching this on your phone, thank you for watching it on your phone. I hope you scheduled it in. But next week will be pre-recorded. I will not be in live. I am actually in a workshop for 3 days next week. So excited about that. It will be a pre-recorded show, and I'm just going to go through, the process and the steps of really kind of cleaning up your smartphone and setting parameters around that. I talked about it. I don't remember if it was last week or the week before, about where you find these pockets of time that you don't realize. I think it was last week when I was talking about, quitting smoking, and I found those pockets of time. And when you quit scrolling, or take your social media off your phone, and your email and your Slack, and you have those as a no phone zone, the amount of mental energy, which we can all use, that comes back and is restored, and it's very youthful to be able to restore that brain power and that brain energy. It's unbelievable the amount of times that I find myself picking up my phone, like going for like a social media app that I'm like, oh yeah, it's not there. It's just like, it's exactly like when I would put my hand in my pocket to grab that smoke, and it's like, oh, it's not there. So I'm going to share with you next week in a pre-recorded version. I will also have it set to release at 9 a.m. on Wednesday, about um, how to do that. I'm going to use my iPhone. I'll show you exactly what I do to basically organize my screen and whatnot. Okay, so thank you for watching. And depending on where you are listening to this, it may be on my podcast. And thank you for joining me live here on YouTube. I look forward to chatting with you again. And let me know in the comments what where are you at? How you doing? Like, do you work from home? Are you just starting to go back to work? Are you finding struggles in time? Like, what the heck? I see a lot of people that are like so busy. They've never been busier in their lives. They got the kids home, they're homeschooling, they're working from home, business is blowing up. And then I see other people that are zen and making gardens, and it's like, huh? And so everybody's in a different spot during this pandemic. And I'm just curious to hear what sort of time struggles that you have. If you're struggling in that area, you might not be. You might have it all down, right? Which is good. Maybe I can have you on the show, and we can talk about that. Some of your confidence building, time building strategies. All right. Thanks. Thank you for hanging out here with me, and I'll see you again next week. Take care.